Happy Monday, everyone. Welcome to a brand new edition of the Media Row podcast. I'm your host, as always, Justin Miller. A huge thank you to Kelly's Little Nipper, our sponsor of the show. Had a wonderful time over the weekend. Megan and I did, being the judges for Nipperween, the Halloween event that Kelly's puts on over there. If you missed it, don't worry. Plenty of great and fun opportunities every time you go down to 1701 East Grand Avenue in Des Moines. When you do go there, make sure to use that keyword in Woodley, and your first drink is on the house. 1701 East Grand Avenue in Des Moines. Kelly's Little Nipper. Great food, great drinks, and even better community. Now, we have a lot to get to in today's show. We have Drake taking over the PFL after a huge victory on the road. We'll break down what has been just a very difficult couple of weeks for the Iowa State Cyclones, and Saturday might have been the worst one if you're a Cyclone fan so far this season. Worst loss. And then Iowa, totally different. I mean, the past few weeks for these two teams can't be more different. And Iowa, a lot of high hopes going into the biggest game of the season this coming weekend. So we have a lot to get to, but before we do, want to make sure we do some housekeeping. And first and foremost, want to make sure you guys are liking, subscribing, commenting, rating, wherever you are getting this podcast, whether that be Spotify, Apple Podcasts, make sure you're following there. And then if you're viewing on YouTube, click that subscribe button as well. And then make sure you're following us all over social media at Media Row Pod on Twitter and on Instagram for firsthand interviews with players and coaches, and then just a lot of fun interactions with everyone throughout the weekend. A lot of fun stuff on social media. Want to make sure you are up to date and following along there. But let's jump into it. Starting with the Drake Bulldogs as they take over the Pioneer Football League in what was a huge road test, and Drake aced it. Now, we'll talk with Coach Woodley, of course, on Wednesday, because it wasn't perfect. But there was a lot of positives. And first and foremost, they get the win. That every time you kick off the football, that's what you are aiming to do. And that's what Drake did. They beat Marist on the road 31-17. And now they improved to 5-2, undefeated in the PFL, 4-0. They've won 4 straight, but huge help from Dayton. The Flyers taking down number 17 Presbyterian, handing them their first loss of the season, 35-19. And that helps Drake tremendously because now with the undefeated Presbyterian down and losing their first game, Drake, they move up to the first spot in the PFL. So this is what your Pioneer Football League standings look like. You have Drake at 4-0, 5-2 overall. Sitting at number 2 is now the Dayton Flyers, 4-1 in the PFL, 6-2 overall. They play the Bulldogs on November 15th in Des Moines. You want to make sure you get out to that game. That could have huge conference implications on the line. Number 3, Presbyterian at 3-1, 7-1 overall. Drake will not face them in the regular season. Yeah, Butler tied for 3rd at 3-1, 5-3 overall. That is who Drake has up next. As I'm going through these standings, there's a clear rhythm going of great team, Drake has them coming up. Great team, Drake has them coming up. The next 3 games for Drake, they play the number 5 team in the PFL, the number 3 team in the PFL, and the number 2 team in the Pioneer Football League. Just a gauntlet of a stretch for the Drake Bulldogs. We are going to learn a lot about the resilience, which has been probably the biggest theme of the Drake Bulldog team throughout this entire season. I mean, that first Thursday night game against Upper Iowa, the first thing I talked about was the resilience of this team against South Dakota State on the road. When you lose a starting quarterback and your backup quarterback, you still find ways to be competitive. Resilience has been the biggest theme, and taking advantage of your opportunities has been another big one with Joe Woodley's team. And in these next 3 games, we are going to see how much of that theme is true to the culture here at Drake. So they finish up with at number 5 in the PFL, St. Thomas, 3-2, 5-3 overall. Drake plays them on November 8th in Des Moines. So 2 of the next 3 are at home, but They face Butler on the road this coming weekend. Dayton sitting at number 2 will test Drake at home, and same with St. Thomas over there at number 5, just one game behind Butler and Presbyterian. But as we get through these standings, I do want to talk about just how Drake was able to hand the Red Foxes another loss in the PFL. And really it starts with something you heard if you were listening on the radio, if you're listening to ESPN Plus broadcast, if you're listening to our show and what we've discussed with Coach Woodley. One thing that this Drake team has really done well in the last 4 weeks has been being balanced in their offensive attack. And that was number one what we saw against Marist on the road. Drake, 352 total yards of offense. Isn't fantastic, but isn't awful. They had 163 yards passing, 189 yards rushing. You have Herman and Meisinger combining for 107 yards in the game. You had Inagawa looking really strong, and we'll dive in more in depth with the young quarterback's performance. But it wasn't that, he was consistent because he was just dinking and dumping the ball, for 2 yards on drag routes or just easy screen passes. He was challenging a really strong secondary in Marist, one of the best passing defenses in the PFL. He was averaging 12.5 yards per pass. The team was averaging 4.1 yards per carry. That's the 4th straight game that Drake has had an average of 4+ yards per carry. That is huge, because what was our biggest concern, going into the PFL stretch of the schedule for the Bulldogs? It was that the running game and the rushing numbers were kind of skewed by the strength of Inagawa, Chase Spellman, with the quarterbacks running the ball. You weren't really seeing the running backs take over. Well, things changed. Nick Herman and that Valpo game, that changed, because now you have Meisinger, Luke Woodson, Herman continuing to just be factors offensively in the running game for the Drake Bulldogs. And they win 4 straight, and then you look and that they've had 4 straight games of 4+ yards per carry. Huge for the Drake Bulldogs. They cleaned up some uncharacteristic penalties in this game as well. In that first half, a little bit in the third quarter, you had Drake with some weird penalties. I mean, J.R. Flood got penalized for unnecessary roughness. Just some odd, still offensive false starts from the offensive line. But overall, they really cleaned it up. They only had 3 penalties for 25 yards, so they didn't beat themselves, which is always a huge key for this Drake Bulldog team that is so young. You look at the quarterback position, Chase Spellman, a sophomore. Xavier Washington's a veteran, but he's kind of hasn't been utilized as much with the strong play from a true freshman in Logan Inagawa. Then you look at the wide receivers. Hank Foley and Jackson Voth are both sophomores. Then you look at the tight end position. Both of those are sophomores. You look at the offensive line, kind of a mix and match, but a lot of young faces in that offensive line. You look at the running back position. Nick Herman's a true freshman leading the way. So this team is stacked full of young talent, and the fact that they are still one of the least penalized teams in the PFL is really promising down the stretch. And our biggest key going into this game for the Drake Bulldogs was, can they win the line of scrimmage? Being able to find holes for the running backs, protecting the quarterback. And then on the defensive end, can they get pressure on the opposing quarterback? Can they force 3 and outs? They did all of that. They were able to get 3 sacks defensively. They protected Inagawa, no sacks allowed. Again, this offensive line that is so young, has been banged up, still protecting Inagawa tremendously. And then Marist, 3 for 11 on 3rd down. Drake getting off the field, forcing Marist to punt it away, giving Drake better field position, allowing Drake to win the time of possession. Now, we'll get into some of the concerns we saw in the game here in a little bit. But going to stay positive, with Des Moines hometown team, and in this 31-17 win on the road against Marist. The biggest thing that I am just seeing with this team is the Bulldogs are playing their absolute best football in crucial moments. In the PFL, in conference play, Logan Inagawa, the true freshman quarterback, has the Drake Bulldogs playing at their absolute best and their most balanced. So starting with the true freshman, you have him leading 12 scoring drives on Drake's last 18. In conference play, Logan Inagawa, 438 yards passing, 6 touchdowns, 155 yards rushing, 2 rushing touchdowns, and no turnovers. This was a Drake team early on. 7 turnovers in their first 4 games, 0 turnovers now. In Inagawa, I tweeted this out. Inagawa, his ability to scramble, his ability to keep his eyes downfield, he doesn't appear to be a true freshman. He looks more like a fifth-year starter with the poise he has in the pocket. But his balance and his different abilities to attack defenses with his arms and legs has just allowed this Drake team to really attack defenses on multiple levels. You have Inagawa's dual threat being able to help guys like Herman average 94 yards rushing a game. Meisinger in the last 2 games averaging 76 yards per game. And this offense as a whole is just looking more dominant and more dominant week in and week out. Drake's offense in conference play, they're top 3 in scoring, top 3 in yards. They're number 1 offense rushing the ball, 4th in offensive efficiency. The defense, on the other hand, completely complementing the Drake's offensive attack. The Drake defense in the PFL, number 1 in yards allowed per game, only allowing 258. Number 1 in rushing yards allowed per game at only 85. 3rd against the pass. 2nd in defensive efficiency. Tied for 1st in sacks, only allowing 2 on the offensive end. 3rd in interceptions, and 1st in opponents' first down percentage, only allowing them to convert 27% of the time. This Drake team is playing their absolute best, sitting on top of their conference. They will be tested, though, in the next few games. We're going to see how Inagawa, the true freshman, handles pressure from Dayton they just made the number 17 FCS team in the country look weak in a 35-19, just absolute dominating game. And then you have Butler, who is right there behind Presbyterian. You're going to have to go on the road to face them this coming weekend. St. Thomas always plays Drake well. They're a top 5 team in the conference. There's going to be a lot of opportunities for this team to grow, but there's also going to be opportunities to see this team take a step back. It'll be interesting to see what Woodley does to prepare this young group of really star players for the Drake Bulldogs these next few games against some really strong PFL opponents, their toughest stretch of the season in conference play, because so far Marist was tough. San Diego's a good win. Both road wins are great. Home wins, on the other hand, they are against some of the lowest teams here in the PFL. So you're still learning where exactly this team is, but absolutely no complaints with the way this offense and defense has improved in conference play. To get into the concerns with the game, you saw Marist really run the ball well with their quarterback, and the middle of the field was pretty wide open for the most part, which was really surprising because we've talked about just the skill set and the veteranship and just the reliability of the linebacker core when you have guys like Sean Allison and J.R. Flood, but that middle of the field was pretty wide open, and I don't know if that is because of the scramblability of the opposing quarterback. I don't know if it was just designs by Marist that really set up the offense well, but in that second quarter where Marist put up, I think it was 14 points, you had kind of Drake all over the place defensively. And I'm going to ask Woodley on Wednesday if he was seeing for the first time maybe how you attack the strong Drake defense and that's with the mobile quarterback. We've seen San Diego State do it, and now we saw Marist do it as well. So now what's the plan for the Drake Bulldogs defense? What is Adam Cox going to draw up here in the next few games, where clearly you're going to need that linebacking core to not only be extra guys to pressure opposing quarterbacks, but to help out a secondary that has improved as well. So it's going to be really interesting. It's going to be a lot of fun. Make sure you're following along at Media Row Pod for this coming game, Drake at Butler this Saturday. That game is a noon kickoff and should be a lot of fun. So make sure you don't want to miss it at Media Row Pod on Twitter. So now we had some positive with the Drake Bulldogs. Now let's get into some negative. The Iowa State Cyclones lose their third straight game, the first time they've lost 3 straight since 2022, and absolutely gave away an upset bid against a top 12 team in BYU. That first quarter, Iowa State was doing whatever they wanted. Rocco looked fantastic. Hansen looked fantastic. Dominic Orange, who was doubtful going into the game, looked great, looked healthy, and that defensive line was applying so much pressure on BYU. But still, even when leading 17-7 against a top 12 team, they fall 41-27 at the end of it all. Cyclones outscored 24-3 in the second half, and it's all because they beat themselves. 4 turnovers by Iowa State. Rocco, 3 interceptions, 6 interceptions by Rocco Beck in the last 5 games for the Iowa State Cyclones. Listen to these numbers. These are not normal Rocco Beck numbers. I'm a huge Rocco fan, but he has not been the Rocco we have seen for the past 2 years. And we were noticing that against Iowa. We were noticing it against Arkansas State. But you fool yourself, you trick yourself into thinking this is early on in the season, he's going to figure it out. It's just, he's missing throws that he's not typically missing. And now he's turning over the ball, which is detrimental to this Iowa State team. Rocco, 6 interceptions in the last 5 games. Last season, he had a total of 9. That's all he had. And then in his first year as a full-time starter for Iowa State, my first year covering the Iowa State Cyclones, only 8 interceptions. And BYU scored, took advantage every time Iowa State gave them the ball. I was absolutely blown away that Haycock did not have a QB spy defensively. Have McLaughlin, have someone, Ebel, one of those linebackers, have just be a QB spy. Because what does BYU do best? They run the ball. And that was the biggest concern for Iowa State, a team that allowed 7 yards per carry in that blowout loss. Well, scoreboard didn't make it look like a blowout, but if you watched every snap of the game against Cincinnati, that did not feel like a close game ever. Cincinnati dominates the line of scrimmage in that one. Arkansas State ran the ball great. This team has not played against the run well at all. And I was absolutely shocked. Haycock never had a QB spy. Felt like if the pocket was collapsing, there'd be 8 easy yards right up the middle or on the edges against the Cyclones defense. And that hurt them too. And sure, Rocco didn't play well. Sure, there was a few drop passes, but it really comes down to this defense is not as good as expected. This team isn't as good as expected. And then you just turn over the ball. You're not going to win a lot of games turning over the ball 4 times. So if you're a Cyclone fan, just absolutely disappointing, gut-wrenching. You felt like this was a game that was going to kind of show you where the season was going to finish up for Iowa State. You kind of knew. Even though the Big 12 is all over the place, maybe you had a little bit of hope, with the help from a few other teams and the way the Big 12 has played out. Maybe there can be some upsets where Iowa State sneaks their way into the Big 12 championship, and then maybe you just go on a run, a magical run, and you find your way into college football playoffs. I don't think a lot of people had that in mind whatsoever, but this game really felt like if Iowa State could get a victory there, all right, change it up. Now there's going to be some momentum in the second half of the season. Maybe you get yourself into a decent bowl game, even getting into the Pop-Tart Bowl or any sort of big bowl game feels like a loss nowadays in college football. But you lose, and in the fashion you lost that game at home, it's basketball season. That's how I picture it. If I'm a Cyclone fan, let's get excited about this basketball team. Just an awful, awful performance by Iowa State. Third straight losses. Again, first time since 2022, and that was another season where you come in with so much hype and so much expectations, and Iowa State just fails to live up to them. That's the second time we've seen that now in the last 4 years. So, honestly, get excited for basketball season. That team should be exciting, but doesn't it just feel like we're getting ready for the Liberty Bowl again? Which I will tell you, sucks. It was not fun. I mean, it was cool to be able to go cover a bowl game, but Iowa State just absolutely did not perform. Memphis lied to me saying they had the best barbecue in the country. No, that's Kansas City. Like, Memphis lied to me about that. Went to a bar and they were like, yeah, you got to get our world famous barbecue chicken sandwich. It was buffalo sauce. It wasn't barbecue sauce. So Liberty Bowl just has a bad place in my heart. I also got told I was fat by some old Southern guy in Memphis. So that was cool too. So I don't think any Cyclone fan wants to go back to the Liberty Bowl. And I would understand why. But it just feels like that kind of season again for the Iowa State Cyclones. Just a brutal, brutal failure to live up to expectations for Iowa State. Let's see if they can string together a few wins to make the end of the season a little exciting. I can't believe they're opening up as 3.5-point favorites against Arizona State. I know they're at home, and I know Arizona State, we've talked about it. I don't know which Arizona State team's going to show up, but no, I can't believe they're 3.5-point favorites. If I'm early on picking this game, and we'll dive into it, of course, more on Friday's show, but I'd have Arizona State all day, especially after how Iowa State has looked these past few weeks. So we started off positive with Drake. We went negative with Iowa State. But let's get positive with the Iowa Hawkeyes. Do not blink now. The Iowa Hawkeyes are a top 4 team in the Big Ten. The past few weeks, this Iowa team, really since that loss to Indiana, has flipped a switch. And even though we love to make jokes about their passing game, they're winning games. And they're actually doing it in dominant fashion. That defense that we criticized against Rutgers has really stepped up, has improved. Now they get ready for their biggest test. But if you're a Hawkeye fan, man, you feel really good about this team. 4-3 the final against Minnesota. Third straight victory for the Hawkeyes heading into a bye week. This game was over at halftime. It really was. Listen to just these drive charts for Iowa. Touchdown, rushing touchdown. They had a passing touchdown, a field goal, pick six, and a punt return for a touchdown. This game was over. Megan and I were watching at Kelly's, and it was over. The Iowa State game, we turned that one on instead. In Minnesota, I don't know what it is. They can look so good one week, and then they go up against Iowa, look like a JV team. They've had one win. They're 12-2 versus Minnesota since 2012. Their last victory shouldn't have even been a victory because of that freak, Cooper DeJean callback. But this team for Iowa is absolutely dominating teams. And it's a credit to Ferentz allowing Gronowski to actually utilize his best asset in his legs. Phil Parker, we always had faith in his defense. That secondary, though, is starting to really impress me when I was really down on them. But even though you're a top 4 team in the Big Ten, you've beat Minnesota. You're really close to beating Indiana at home. Beat Penn State in a close one. That game, again, mixed emotions on it because you had a quarterback that couldn't throw the ball down the field. You had to run him 130 yards and 2 touchdowns to win by 1 against a team that fired their head coach, a team that was without their starting quarterback, just a team in shambles. So I don't know really how confident you feel after that, but seeing your name, seeing that logo in the top 4, yeah, it's perfect heading into this next game, which is really going to show where Iowa stands. Iowa has to go up against a top 10 team in Oregon at home. It is hostile in Kinnick. We know that. But this Oregon team is not like Penn State, where if you can only throw for 60 yards against Oregon, Oregon is going to dominate. You can run 130 yards with your quarterback, but I think this Oregon team doesn't allow that. If you can't throw the ball and they just hone in on the run, it'll be interesting. But the positive is that was the type of victory Iowa needed. These past 3 victories in the style have been what Iowa fans needed heading into this Oregon game. You did not want to lose. If you lost to Penn State, maybe you feel okay, but with the way that program is right now, no, you don't want to lose to that Penn State team. They are 3-0 heading into Oregon. That crowd is going to be insane. This is the biggest game of the season for Iowa and could be the biggest game for the Iowa Hawkeyes really since that top 4 matchup in 2021 against Penn State with Petrus, in the final seconds throwing that touchdown. This is huge. And Iowa's handled teams to get to this point, and now it's just can they battle it out against one of the Big Ten's best in Oregon? It'll be really interesting. Will be a lot of fun to cover. Friday, we will really dive in to all 3 of these teams. Drake against Butler will, of course, give our preview. We'll give our thoughts on the Cyclone Arizona State game. And then Iowa, of course, on a bye. But we'll talk about, what they have up next in Oregon as well. Also, show note, because, of course, Wednesday, we have our Wednesday with Woodley conversation. Friday's show is going to be a little bit of a longer show because we have college basketball starting that following Monday. Drake women play at noon. Drake men play at 3 on November 3rd. So before we dive into college football on Friday, we are going to do our Missouri Valley Conference men's basketball preview. And it's going to be a deep dive. We're going to talk about every team in the Missouri Valley Conference. And I'm going to give kind of my preseason rankings as well for the Missouri Valley Conference. So don't want to miss that. We'll have a lot of fun and can't wait to hang out with you guys throughout another fun week of the Media Row podcast. We will see you on Wednesday alongside Drake football coach Joe Woodley for our Wednesday with Woodley on the next Media Row podcast.